Well, ladies and gentlemen, another day in South African politics and another day where the circus keeps rolling on. I must admit, I had already prepared a different video for today, but I had to push that one aside because the news breaking right now is simply too important to ignore. Before I dive in, let me just remind you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and if you'd like to support the work I do here, you're always welcome to buy me a coffee. Now, let's get into the latest developments, because there's a lot to unpack. The first big story concerns MTN and its controversial political ties. A recent article in the National Security News, verified by secondary sources, has exposed the role of Philip Fennikerk, a key consultant and advisor to MTN. According to reports, he has been directly tied to MTN's chair, Jonas, who you might remember was once set to become South Africa's special economic envoy to the US. His candidacy fell apart after some inflammatory comments he made, but despite being disqualified, he still sits in that role, albeit doing very little. What makes Fennikerk's involvement so striking is that invoices suggest he has received hundreds of thousands of dollars in consultancy fees and expenses, paid through MTN Dubai, which also happens to hold the Iran cell stake in MTN. His relationship with MTN, according to the article, was established during Cyril Ramaphosa's time as MTN chair. Ramaphosa reportedly introduced him to the then CEO and facilitated MTN's highly controversial partnership with Iran's Ministry of Defense for MTN Iran cell. That link between MTN, Iran, and Ramaphosa is undeniable, and it opens up serious questions. Fennikerk was apparently orchestrating lobbying efforts in the United States, hiring lobbying firms, and monitoring South African political delegations visiting Washington, such as Solidarity, AfriForum, and the DA. He would brief MTN leadership on their arrivals, positions, and discussions, which raises the concern that MTN was essentially spying on these delegations and channeling information back to the South African government. When a whistleblower revealed his dual role, it immediately raised red flags under US transparency regulations and South African governance ethics. What we see here is a troubling example of how large corporates like MTN blur the line between business, politics, and intelligence. Some are even asking whether this same network was used to move illicit funds between Iran and the ANC. That remains unanswered, but it's a question worth asking. Moving on to the United States more broadly, we can't ignore the trade tariffs. As you know, South Africa has been slapped with a 30% tariff on its exports to the US, creating major pressure on local businesses. In response, the government announced a Plan B, which was to expand trade with the EU and China to offset the losses. The reality, however, is proving far more complicated. The EU market is already saturated and highly competitive, making it difficult for new exporters to break in. China, while large, has its own regulatory hurdles and tough demands. The ANC's Plan B, while logical on paper, is hitting brick walls in practice, exposing once again how the party's strategies often lack serious long-term planning. At a time when South Africa desperately needs to strengthen its relationship with the US, you would think the ANC would play it safe. But no, they never fail to surprise. Which brings us neatly to the next bombshell. The SANDF's planned joint naval exercises with Russia and China in November 2025. The timing could not be worse, because these drills will coincide with South Africa hosting the G20 summit. Most G20 nations are not exactly friendly with Russia at the moment, so why would our government choose to run military exercises with Russia and China right then? It makes absolutely no diplomatic sense. History shows this isn't new. The first exercises were in 2019 and the second in 2023 off Durban. But the 2025 version will be in the Western Cape, with China taking the lead role. The Department of Defense claims the aim is to deepen maritime cooperation and promote stability, but let's be honest, the symbolism will overshadow any supposed benefits. We already saw the US cancel a planned exercise with South Africa earlier this year because of last-minute disagreements, and this new move risks alienating even more Western allies. Hosting the G20 while cozying up to Russia and China militarily is a diplomatic own goal of epic proportions. If that wasn't enough, Ramaphosa recently stirred controversy on another front. On the 29th of August, during a Zimbabwean agricultural show in Harare, he praised Zimbabwe's land reform program, describing it as essential and lauding the empowerment of farmers through policy reform and mechanization. Now, anyone who knows Zimbabwe's history understands why this is such a bizarre stance. Land reform there was carried out through forced confiscation of white-owned farms without compensation, devastating the agricultural sector and collapsing the economy. Food insecurity, foreign exchange crises, and humanitarian fallout followed. By 2013, white commercial farming was effectively wiped out. For Ramaphosa to praise that system is alarming. The DA quickly condemned his remarks, calling the Zimbabwean land reform a disaster, and they are absolutely correct. While South Africa is not Zimbabwe, the ANC's obsession with expropriation without compensation lingers, and Ramaphosa's comments only fuel fears that the ANC could resort to similar populist policies in the future. It's reckless and dangerous, especially from a president who is supposed to be a reformer. Finally, we turn to Stellenbosch, where a leaked recording has added fuel to the fire around employment equity. In it, a municipal HR manager urged the municipality to stop hiring white people, even suggesting using illicit methods to fill technical positions with non-white candidates. This comes just as the Employment Equity Amendment Act came into effect on the 1st of September, mandating quotas in both government and corporate structures. The government promised these quotas would not result in firing or discrimination, but within 24 hours we already see evidence of the opposite. Stellenbosch demographics are diverse, with a large colored majority, but the outright instruction to block white hires is deeply troubling. It confirms the worst fears many had, that equity targets would be weaponized into racial exclusion rather than balanced inclusion. So, there you have it. From MTN's shadowy ties to Iran and the ANC, to trade tensions with the US, naval exercises with Russia and China, Ramaphosa's misguided praise of Zimbabwe's land seizures, and the racialized hiring practices emerging in Stellenbosch, the picture that emerges is of a government lurching from one bad decision to another. The ANC denies links to Iran, denies mishandling trade, denies undermining diplomacy, and denies racial targeting, but the evidence keeps piling up. As always, these are my views. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Until tomorrow, stay safe and stay awake.